The federal government has released new immigration targets, and they've been set higher despite the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, it's because of the pandemic's impact, particularly on the economy, that the federal government wants to bring in a record number of newcomers. Here is a look at the previous plan compared to the new plan unveiled today. In 2021, the government is now aiming to add 401,000 new permanent residents and 411,000 in 2022. Marco Mendicino is the Minister of Immigration. Welcome back to the program, Minister.
Thanks for having me, Catherine.
Now, this increase that you are proposing, it is to make up for the shortfall this year, as I understand it. How big will this year's shortfall be?
Well, I begin by saying that this government has a very strong record in meeting its annual immigration targets, and that was true up until 2020, when, of course, the world turned upside down with COVID-19. But we're ramping back up speed. We're making more and more progress each and every week. I think in spite of all of the barriers that have been caused by COVID-19, that will hit roughly half of our target for 2020, which is in itself quite remarkable. And the plan, what it does today, is it lays out and charts out a course for the future by continuing to grow our economy and accelerate our economic overall strength through immigration.
I wonder, if you were only able to achieve half of your target this year, why should you assume that you will be able to do so much better next year? Inevitably, there will still be some travel restrictions in place, for instance.
Because we're going to double down with this plan by investing in resources, by ensuring that we're leveraging technology. We've already started to do that in many lines of our business, and we want to see a system that is truly modernized. And why is it important? Because we have urgent needs today in our economy. And this is where immigrants have stepped up, in particular in the healthcare sector, where our frontline workers who have been working around the clock tirelessly need reinforcements. We've been able to proceed with safe and orderly immigration throughout the pandemic by adding resources and protocols to the border, and we are going to see that chart forward.
You talk about the importance of modernizing. I heard you talking a lot about that in your news conference earlier today as well. But surely reaching half your target this year is due to more than just problems with the computer systems, the need to digitize it. It has to do, I can only imagine, with the situation in terms of border closures around the world, and that doesn't appear to be about to change anytime soon.
And that won't come as a shock to anyone. And the health and safety of Canadians is our top priority. But we also have a rare and special opportunity to look at the domestic immigration, which is already within our borders. These are our workers. These are our international students who are just at the outset of their professional careers. And so by looking at this group, we who are already contributing, who are already putting their shoulder to the wheel, as I said, putting food on the table of Canadians, making sure that we are taking care of our seniors. And by broadening and accelerating the pathway to permanent residency, will drive that economic recovery going forward.
So is that the message that people hoping to become permanent residents of Canada should be hearing then today, is that they have a much better chance if they're already in the country?
We think that there is an imperative to take a look at the domestic immigration that was within our borders, workers, students, and in some cases, asylum seekers. As you may recall, we announced a pilot project last summer that would welcome the guardian angels who were serving on the front lines of the hospitals and the CHSLD in Quebec. We think we can continue to leverage the experience and the talent that is already here as a way of making up for some of the lost ground this year.
But I'm trying to understand, are you in any way depending on a vaccine, a change in circumstances in terms of people being able to move around the world in order to hit what are record targets that you've set for yourself?
Well, as you know, we're pursuing a vaccine aggressively, and our sincere hope is to acquire one as quickly as possible.
But is it baked into your plan?
Let's not forget, as I was saying earlier, that 1 in 4 healthcare workers are immigrants, and that includes pharmacists, that includes health researchers. And so who knows, we may actually see a breakthrough here developed by one of these aspiring Canadians that will allow us to achieve a vaccine even sooner than we'd hoped. So the whole point of this plan is to ensure that we are looking at the domestic immigration that we have within our borders, and yes, to also look forward to that moment when we are able to continue to attract the best and the brightest from around the world.
Yeah, but I mean, you say, who knows, it could come from someone within Canada, and of course that would be a lovely scenario that I think we would all welcome, but who knows is not the basis for a plan. So I do want to understand, are these targets contingent on some sort of dramatic change in the situation in the world right now?
Well, I just want to be sure your viewers understand that we have continued to see safe and orderly immigration throughout the pandemic.
But
We've been
greatly
able to see
diminished.
people move across international. We've been able to see people move across international borders by ensuring that we have the required public health and safety resources at the border, including quarantining, including testing and tracing increasingly. And that will lay out the blueprint for continuing to grow through immigration by having those resources at the border. And what the plan does is it ensures that we are aligning the needs of our economy, which includes the healthcare sector, other sectors like in the trades and the skills. And don't take it from me. Listen to the economists, listen to the business and labor leaders of the country who are saying that we have an economic imperative here to continue to grow through immigration, and we have the plan to do that.
Let's assume for a moment that you can indeed meet your targets. They are record targets that you have set. I wonder about helping those new Canadians integrate. Are you going to put additional money into, for instance, resettlement services, language training, housing?
The OECD has recognized that we have the best system for integration in the world, and we are going to double down on those strategies, as I said, by adding resources, by giving additional resources to our settlement service providers, by leveraging technology, by starting the process of integration even before they've arrived. And we've done that in the context of this pandemic. For instance, with international students, which we just revived a pathway for beginning on October 20th. Prior to that, we ensured that we worked closely with our provincial partners and with schools to allow for online education. And, I was just on the phone with a number of polytech institutions, and they talked to me about how they are accelerating that integration process by giving them orientation online. So I think we can scale up those types of techniques as a means of integrating immigrants as quickly as possible. And what we see is that when that outcome is achieved, we actually have a stronger and faster economic recovery.
I want to ask you a moment about migrant workers. I mean, you talked about healthcare workers, but there have been many calls for the government to do better at recognizing their contribution during this pandemic, create more pathways to ensure that they can become Canadian citizens. What are you doing on that front?
Well, over $100 million to ensure that migrant workers are able to work in safe conditions. I have been worried, like you and everybody, that we have seen challenges to those who are working on our farms and our food processing plants. There's a lot more work to be done there. We acknowledge it. I've also had conversations with folks like the Migrant Workers Alliance who are appealing to the government to take a look at status. I do think that there is an opportunity right now to have a broad conversation, not only in the agricultural sector, but in many other sectors, including in health, and to see if there are ways to broaden and accelerate the pathways to permanent residency. And Canadians understand that. They understand that when people step up and they give back, and they are helping us in our response to COVID-19, that is a uniquely Canadian quality that should be rewarded with opportunities to become Canadian.
And yet a conversation is not the same thing as a plan, Minister. So you say that you are having conversations, you want to continue having conversations. You've set these targets now. Do you expect more pathways for migrant workers to become Canadians as part
Catherine,
of it?
Every good plan begins with a conversation and a dialogue. And what we have done is we have listened very carefully to those who are advocating for migrant workers and have committed to working with them to ensure that they are able to work in a safe environment. And also, as part of this plan, to take a look at workers and students and asylum seekers and to see whether or not there is a way to accelerate their pathway to becoming Canadians. That is a blueprint. That is a plan. And we are going to double down by ensuring that the resources are there to deliver on it.
Just in closing, Minister, I want to ask you, do you think, given that you are setting these record targets and given the strain that so many Canadians are feeling in their own lives right now as they may have lost their jobs or worry about whether their jobs will still be there for them, is there any convincing that you and your government need to do to get Canadians on board with the kind of targets that you're setting?
Look, my heart goes out to everybody who's lost their job, and that's why the government has introduced things like the emergency response benefit and the emergency wage subsidy. My message to them is immigrants create jobs. 1 in 3 business owners is an immigrant. We did our announcement today with a wonderful gentleman named Chef Joe, who showed the resilience and the perseverance of people who want to come to Canada to contribute to our economy, to create more jobs. We can continue to do that, and we will do that by executing this plan.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time today, Minister.
Thank you, Catherine.
Hi,
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.